Subcommittee will come to order. There's a manager's amendment to H.R. 390, and I want to recognize myself to explain the manager's amendment. The manager's amendment to H.R. 390 reflects bipartisan discussions and agreement between myself and Ranking Member Barton, the gentleman from Texas. We have worked together to bring sports fans and college alums across the nation a playoff system for the NCAA Division I football that would consistently crown an undisputed national champion. And I want to thank Mr. Barton for his tireless work on the legislation and the amendment, as well as to all of the subcommittee members who worked so hard on this particular piece of legislation and who also support this system. The amendment makes 3 additions to the bill. These changes reflect solutions to problems we identified in our May 2009 hearing on the Bowl Championship Series. First, it revises the definition of an unfair or deceptive act to clarify the bill's intent. This will ensure that the BCS cannot find any loopholes. BCS officials won't simply be able to get away with calling their game, quote, the final game or the big game, or something that implies that it is the championship game when there has not been a playoff system to get down to the final 2 teams. Second, it ensures that all teams are equally eligible to participate in a conference playoff system that is fair to all teams. Great teams that happen to play in non-favorite conferences can no longer be kept out of the playoff based on arbitrary rules. If a team is good enough to qualify for the playoff, then it will get in. Finally, the amendment makes sure that there is an equitable distribution of revenue from a playoff system. Teams from non-favorite conferences that qualify for the playoffs and go just as deep into the playoff as favorite conference teams will have to be paid equitably, and the same as teams from the 6 favorite conferences. The BCS couldn't pay one team more than another just because those teams came from different conferences. Overall, this manager's amendment improves the bill and helps ensure that the vision of a true college football champion determined on the field of play comes to fruition. The chairman yields back the balance of his time, and now the chairman recognizes the ranking member of the overall committee and is author of this bill, Mr. Barton, for 5 minutes for opening statements.
Thank you, Chairman Rush, for agreeing to mark H.R. 390 up. Thank you also for your co-sponsorship or co-authorship of the bill. Thank you for your you and your staff's cooperation and work, leadership on the manager's amendment, the nature of a substitute, which I think improves the bill, clarifies and strengthens the purpose of the bill. Before I give my opening statement, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that a letter in support of the bill by Congressman Gary Miller be inserted in the record at the appropriate time.
Hear no objections to order.
And I would also like to inform the committee that Ranking Member Radonovich is not here today, not because of lack of interest, but he has a family health issue with his spouse, and he's engaged, as he should be, with her treatment. What can we say? It's December, and the BCS is in chaos again. We have 2 excellent undefeated teams that are going to play for the so-called national championship, University of Texas and the University of Alabama. I think they're worthy teams. My wife went to the University of Texas, so obviously she's excited. I know many of my friends, and you do too, in the Alabama delegation are excited. But having said that, once again this year we have 3 undefeated teams, TCU, Boise State, and University of Cincinnati, that have played the same number of games, beaten the same number of opponents, and their players and fans have no chance to say that they might play in the ultimate game for college football and be the national champions. We also have a number of very worthy teams. University of Florida, which was #1 all year long, I believe, until they were defeated by Alabama in the SEC championship game. I think they could legitimately say that in a playoff they might win the playoff. I mean, who wants to play Florida this week? And with great respect to my friend from Nebraska, the end of the dais, who would have thought Nebraska came within a second of defeating the University of Texas? Nebraska's defense is unbelievable, and the only thing that their defensive lineman didn't sack at Cowboy Stadium last weekend was Jerry Jones. And he would have sacked him, but he probably didn't know how to get up into his box to do it. So there is a need for a college playoff system. I think it's telling that they changed the name of the subdivision for the schools in Division 1A from Division 1A college football to the Football Bowl subdivision. And yet the other schools that play football, they call them the Football Championship subdivision because they play through to a playoff. But in all of sports, at least in the United States, at every level, whether it's professional or amateur, there is some sort of a merit-based, competition-based, winner-take-all playoff or national track meet or swimming meet, except in the Football Bowl subdivision. Now, can they be right and every other sport be wrong, Mr. Chairman? I don't think so. What our fans and friends really need to know about the Football Bowl subdivision system is it's not about choosing the champion through competition on the gridiron. It's about revenue sharing for the schools that are in the BCS conferences. I had my staff do some research, Mr. Chairman, and we found out that TCU, which has gone to bowl games 10 of the 11 years that the BCS has been in existence, and has gone to 4 straight games the last 4 years, and has won 4 straight bowl games the last 4 years, have received less bowl money than Baylor University, where my mother went to school and my brother went to school and where I grew up. So I'm not anti-Baylor Bear. But Baylor, which hasn't been in a bowl game in the 11 years of the BCS and has been beaten by TCU 2 times in the last 4 years, Baylor University has received more bowl money than TCU. Now, why is that, Mr. Chairman? It's because Baylor is a part of the Big 12, which is one of the BCS conferences, and the Big 12 has got a guarantee of 1 or 2 BCS bowl slots, depending on where their teams are ranked at the end of the season. And they also have tie-ins so that, for example, this year, 8 of the 12 Big 12 schools are in bowl games. Now, I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman, because one of those schools is my school, Texas A&M. So I'm not anti-bowl and I'm not anti-Big 12, but it is telling that TCU, which has beaten everybody on the field, has received less money in the bowl games they've played in than Baylor, which hasn't even been in a bowl game, Mr. Chairman, in the last 11 years. And I would also point out that as the bowl subdivision, football bowl subdivision is currently constituted, there are 120 schools that play. In the 11 years of the existence of the BCS, how many of those schools have played in the so-called championship game, Mr. Chairman, of 120 schools over 11 years? 11. 11. You can almost name them just like this: University of Florida, LSU, University of Texas, Miami, Florida State, USC, Ohio State. I mean, that's 6 or 7 just right off the top of my head. We have a system that is designed as an economic cartel, Mr. Chairman. It does an outstanding job of that. 80 to 90% of the revenue generated by the bowls in college football goes to the BCS schools. But if the fan thinks the BCS is about picking the best team or teams to play play for the championship, they're totally wrong. It's just, that's just an aside. Again, when the BCS was created, there were the 4 big BCS bowls: the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl, and the Fiesta Bowl. They rotated the championship game each year. Then 3 years ago or 4 years ago, they decided, well, geez, that's silly. Let's play those 4 bowl games every year, and then the next week we'll do the so-called BCS championship game, and we'll rotate that among those 4. So now you've gone from 4 to 5, but you still don't have a playoff. The money's gone up, but the money is equally shared. The teams that play in the BCS Bowl that's not the championship game get just as much money as the teams that play in the BCS championship game. It is truly a cartel. And in the United States, if this cartel existed in the business world, it would be in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and we wouldn't be having a markup on a little benign bill like this. We'd be having an antitrust markup. I might also point out that all the revenue generated, because it's tax exempt under college, under nonprofit rules of the IRS for the colleges, is not taxed. So we have a multi-billion-dollar operation that's not taxed, it's not subject to the antitrust laws, and doesn't really come close to having, as you pointed out in your opening statement, a fair and equitable system to determine the national championship. So I'm very proud to be marking this bill up. I'm very proud to have you as a co-sponsor, and I look forward to moving the bill to full committee. Thank you for your courtesy, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, the Chair thanks the ranking member. The Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Ohio. Ms. Sutton is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will submit my statement for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Stupak, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All due respect to the sponsor of this bill, I don't think we should be spending our time on this legislation. BCS to me means business, consumers, and seniors. That's where I think we should be focusing, not on college football. I yield back.
The Chair thanks the gentleman. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, for 1 minute.
For 1 minute or 2 minutes? 1 minute. I thought it was. Yeah, what? Mr. Chairman, I was the chairman of this committee, and we had a hearing on this subject, and I think it brought out some of the points that Mr. Barton made so eloquently, and also brought out the other side of it. And I think because of that hearing, the BCS went out and started to try to reform. And I think perhaps Mr. Barton's intention here is well-meaning, and BCS should probably take particularly attention to some of his comments. I know in the hearing we had, we explored with the representatives from BCS how to include participation, how to have disparity with the revenue under the current system, and consider the impact of any system on the academic integrity of the student athletes in their institution. So I think Chairman Barton makes some good points, in particular in light of the fact that the Division I AA has a championship runoff. Now, I don't think there's anybody in the room that knows last year who was the winner of that. It was the University of Richmond. And there's lots of colleges, and they're capable of having this runoff. Unfortunately, this year, University of Richmond did not win. But in Mr. Barton pointed out, every other sport we've had the clear opportunity for a runoff, yet in a Division 1A we don't have it. I think just in closing, I would suggest to my colleagues that the BCS has made reforms since the hearing I had in 2005. They agreed to expand the Presidential Oversight Committee to include a representative from each conference, including a representative from the non-automatic qualifying conferences. Prior to this change, the non-automatic qualifying conferences only had one individual representing all 5 non-automatic qualifying conferences. So I think there's a list of things they've done to improve since 2005 when I had my hearing. I think BCS certainly should take note of this hearing and this bill and some of the comments that the Ranking Member Barton has said, and do due diligence because in the end this is something that has been occurring throughout America and all other sports except for this Division 1A, and so I think Mr. Barton is being commended for bringing this to our attention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Mr. Matheson for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 quick points. First, I think the antitrust question is one that ought to be addressed. If you're in an automatic qualifying conference, that means every year the funds from BCS games get spread across those teams. If you're not in one of those conferences, you need one of your teams to go undefeated, and maybe they get in. So I think there is an antitrust question that ought to be addressed. Secondly, I think the powers that be in the BCS have once again this year given us cause for concern. In terms of determining the matchups, I think in an effort to protect schools from the BCS conferences from potentially losing to a school from a non-BCS conference, they decided to match up TCU and Boise State in what, I don't know if we should call it the Fiesta Bowl or the Kids Table Bowl, because I think these two upstarts were put at the kids' table to play their own game. So I think, again, there's something that a lot of my constituents feel isn't fair about this system, and I think it's good we're having this hearing. I'll yield back.
Recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, for 1 minute.
Thank you, gentlemen from the Big Ten. I appreciate the opportunity to engage in the annual discussion about the validity of BCS versus playoffs. Usually it's done on local sports radio, but since we're stuck in D.C. Dealing with major issues, at least gives us an opportunity to vent. I am a hardcore college football fan. I want a playoff system. I just never envisioned legislating it. But I have to admit to Mr. Barton, my good friend from Texas, and that a few days ago I probably wouldn't have been very supportive of this bill, just from the fact that we could let it be settled within the college football and NCAA ranks. Until a decision was made on Saturday night to extend the game by an extra second. So now Big 12 football championship games are now officially 60 minutes and 1 second. I believe that decision to falsely add 1 second back on the clock was made solely for money to get Texas into the national championship game and wasn't done in the more honest and pure way of making sure that it was settled on the field. It was settled by, I think, Big 12 officials in an antitrust way, via coordinating and conspiring with the crew upstairs, the replay crew, because the officials on the field ruled the game over and were practically running off the field when they got buzzed from upstairs and told to add an extra second. So do I think there's problems and corruption based on money in this system? I think that was apparent Saturday night. So I appreciate the timeliness of you bringing this measure. And to my good friend from Michigan, we were the real national champions in 1997. And one other comment, I think he made a good point. There's a lot of other major issues that affect far more many people than this bill does, but we do have time to be able to do more than one thing.
Well,
I yield
gentlemen,
back.
before you,
Yes.
You realize that the Big 12 championship game was played in my congressional district. So
Well, I didn't know it was in, but I knew
I
it was
supplied the
near.
timekeeper.
And if you could introduce me to the timekeeper.
No, I know you. That's tough. That's tough.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Mr. Burrow from Georgia.
I thank the chairman. I know that anything and everything is important to somebody, but with all due respect, I have to agree with Mr. Stupak that I really think that we have more important things to spend our time on. In particular, this sort of thing is usually the sort of thing that is reserved for statements of the sense of Congress, a resolution that does not purport to have law, the force of an effect of law, but expresses Congress's sense about saying, I don't like the BSC system any more than anybody else, does, but I do think that actually going so far as to pass a law that would make it an unlawful practice to refer to this as the way the sponsors choose to refer to it is a little bit overboard. So my mama taught me not to say, if you can't say anything nice about something, don't say anything at all, so I'll defer any further comment on it. But thank you for your leadership in calling this hearing, and I look forward to getting on with something else.
The chair thanks you for your not saying anything about the bill. The chair now recognizes Mr. Space for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to preface my remarks by indicating the respect that I have for Ranking Member Barton and certainly you, Mr. Chairman. However, I agree with Mr. Barrow in his comments. And I think that this issue it's more than just whether or not this is something that belongs within the realm of Congress or government. I just think it's sending the wrong message at a time when unemployment rates are historically high, at least in the modern era. The number of working poor in my district who don't fall within the unemployment rates continues to skyrocket, so that many people who are working full-time are forced to stand in line at food pantries or soup kitchens to feed their families. And I'm as big a football fan. I played college football. I'm as big a football fan as there is in Congress, perhaps, and I may be as big a Buckeye fan as you're ever going to find. I just think, with all due respect to a ranking member who I think very highly of and a chairman who I think very highly of, that our time would be better spent on other issues. And for that reason, if I were going to vote on this, if a roll call vote is called for, I will vote present. And with that, I yield back.
Is there any other member? The chair does not see any other members who are present. So now we will call up the bill, H.R. 390. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 390, a bill to prohibit as an unfair and deceptive act or practice the promotion, marketing, and advertising of any postseason NCAA Division I football games as a national championship game, unless such game is the culmination of a fair and equitable playoff system.
And open to amendment at any point in time. I recognize myself to offer the manager's amendment sponsored by myself and Mr. Barton.
Amendment to H.R. 390 offered by Mr. Rush and Mr. Barton.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Page 3, line 9, insert, or make a similar representation after national championship game.
The amendment has been distributed, and without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. In my opening statement, I explained the manager's amendment quite thoroughly, and I want to just say, in response to some of the other members of the subcommittee, this is not the nation's top priority, this bill that we are considering. Indeed, it might not be the top priority for most of the members of my congressional district. But I do think that there is time in our pursuit of more difficult issues and more priority issues to not overlook the fact that colleges and universities are funded by taxpayer dollars. And we have to ask ourselves, should we be allowing the institutions in the big dominant conferences to command such a disproportionate amount of those revenues leaving crumbs to the rest of the remaining schools. We should also say that let's not overlook the fact that college football is a multi-billion-dollar business, and the fact that it is a business that is a significant part of the American culture. And it really served among some to help them negotiate during these difficult times. And so I think that it's important for us to not just view this hearing and this markup as an either-or hearing or markup. This is a both-and. It's not a, we can, in this Congress, and we've done this in the past, we can walk across the street and chew gum at the same time. We can do a number of things at the same time. And so I think that this is an appropriate business of the Congress. Does any other member seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
The ranking member of the full committee, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Support of the manager's amendment.
The chairman of the ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
I won't take 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman. I want to rise in support of the manager's amendment, and because it does improve the bill and it does clarify, does make it fair and more equitable. But I want to respond to my friends who didn't necessarily speak in opposition to the bill, but spoke more to the why should we do this? Why should the Congress take this up? Because I think that's a legitimate question. I think it's telling that no one defends the current BCS system. No one at the podium, at the dais, in their opening remarks, where they're for or against the bill, defends the current system. It's more, well, we don't like it, but what the hey? Shouldn't we be using our time more productively on bigger issues? Well, the response to that is the BCS has had 11 years to get it right, and they never will. It is multi-billion dollars. It is an interstate commerce. It is under the jurisdiction of this committee. So it is not the highest priority, but it is an issue that is worthy of some review by the subcommittee and hopefully the full committee. Secondly, I would go back to what I said. The BCS was put together by the big football conferences, which my school is a member of. So I'm not anti-big football, not anti-Big 12 or Big 10 or SEC or Pac-10 or Atlantic Coast or Big East or Notre Dame at all. But they made a decision to kind of take their football and go create this system. And when they did that, they also made a decision to exclude everybody else from the majority of the revenue. Now, if a member of Congressman did that with the Medicare system or the Medicaid system or the food stamp program or the veterans program and said, we're going to create a system that advantages Texas and Florida and Illinois and New York and California, and we're going to take 80% of the money, and then we're going to let the Nebraskas and the Iowas and the Georgias and the Utahs get the crumbs, so to speak, members would be outraged. Now, again, the BCS is not the highest priority in the world, Mr. Chairman, or in this country, but when they started out to create an economic cartel to the advantage of the members of the cartel, they create the cartel, they maintain the cartel, and they show no real willingness to change it, although, as Mr. Stearns has pointed out, they are beginning to change. And when you add to the fact that this bill doesn't demand that they do anything but change their name, now we hope they go to a playoff. I don't know why you can't take the BCS bowls and then the winners of those have a playoff, or use the existing bowl system and have a real playoff like they have in college basketball or college baseball or college tennis. But whatever. We don't, this is not a heavy-handed congressional bill, but it is something that should get the attention of the BCS. I've talked to the Big 12 commissioner. I've talked to the Atlantic Coast commissioner. I've talked to some of the college presidents in the Big 12. I've talked to some of the athletic directors, the head football coaches. So I'm trying to move within the system, but they all tell me off the record, unless there is some outside forcing agent, it will never change. And that's why, Mr. Chairman, it's important to move this bill. And it's not that this is the, I mean, I'm going to Copenhagen next week for the climate change. You know, I have been, as you well know, extremely engaged in the cap and trade issue, the net neutrality telecommunications issue, a number of issues before this subcommittee. So as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, we can multitask, but this is a bill that needs to move. It's a bill that will do a good thing, and hopefully it may get the BCS to do what they should have done 11 years ago. So I hope that we move the bill today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair, is there any other member who seeks recognition? The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for being late, and I'd like my full statement to be placed into the record.
So ordered.
One, I appreciate both your and our ranking member of the full committee's leadership on this, and I think the bill will send a message. And I know I said at our May 1st hearing that we had that I represent a district at the University of Houston is a predominant four-year school that our students go to from our district. And we've been through problems with what's happened with the BCS Bowl in the University of Houston for years. And I think this addresses the frustrating thing is that in addition to receiving guaranteed bids to BCF Bowl games, the 6 BCS conferences receive $18 million. The 5 coalition conferences receive no automatic bids and receive roughly $9.5 million. So we're talking about pretty substantial money for higher education. And that's why it needs to be fairer. And I would like the BCS to be able to deal with it themselves. But if they can't, then they need to see what Congress needs to act on it. And that's why I support the bill. I know I don't need to run through all the numerous examples about how unfair the system is produced and what we have. I'm happy this year that TCU and Cincinnati and has been very successful, and I wouldn't want to leave out Boise State, but there's still a problem even with what some of the things we're seeing this year with very small market and smaller schools. So I appreciate it, and I support both the manager's amendment but also the bill.
Would the gentleman yield just for a moment? Would the gentleman yield just for a couple of seconds? Yes. I just want to also remind the members of this committee that out of this committee some years ago, we heard some of the similar comments when this committee dealt with the issue of fairness in sports, gender fairness in sports, and out of that work came the whole Title IX program, which certainly has worked to bring parity, a lot of parity in the area of sports as it relates to both male and female sports. So this is not just a specious or some non-important issue. It is an important issue. It's not a priority, but it's an important issue.
Well, and I agree, and in fact, nobody in Congress would ever say we would go back and change what was done with Title IX. All of us have daughters who've been successful, and without Title IX, they wouldn't have been participants in high school sports, and without the re-emphasis on gender equity. So I enjoy watching women's soccer just as much as I enjoy men's soccer. So.
The chair. The chair want to recognize now Mr. Scalise for 1 minute. Then
I'll waive opening statement, Mr. Chairman.
Who seeks recognition?
Strike the requisite number of words, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Mr. Stern for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, as I pointed out in my opening statement, we had a hearing on this in 2005. And at that point, Mr. Barton was the chairman. And I commend him for allowing my subcommittee to have this hearing. Because of that hearing, BCS did make a lot of changes. Right after that hearing, in 2006, the National Championship game was created as a separate event from other bowl games, which provided additional access for participation in a BCS bowl game because it expanded the number of bowl slots by 2. This benefited all conferences, including the non-automatic qualifying conferences. Again, in 2006, as a result of this hearing, the criteria for selection as an at-large team was broadened to allow more teams to qualify. Previously, to qualify, you had to be a team with 9 victories and ranked in the top 12 of the final BCS standings. In 2006, the criteria was broadened to include teams ranked in the top 14 of the final BCS standings. 2008, they made standards were established by which these automatic qualifying conferences could earn an automatic bid. And as I mentioned in my opening statement just last month, the BCS agreed to expand the Presidential Oversight Committee of the BCS to include a representative from each conference, including representatives from the non-automatic qualifying conferences. So, because of the hearing in 2005, I think BCS has made vast improvements. And Frank, not vast maybe, not the word vast, but they've made improvements.
I agree with that.
And I think Mr. Barton said he agrees with that. So that's good. The news. That's good news. Now, to Mr. Barrow and others that say, "Why are we looking at this?" I have to tell you, if we hadn't had the hearing in 2005, none of those things would occur. So, Mr. Barton, by bringing this forward and able to get a markup, and Mr. Rush, as leadership here, we have a chance to perhaps move this further along and get some more reforms. So it's a double-edged sword in the sense that the BCS is improving, making changes, and perhaps this markup today will also move in a direction to help make it clearer, more competitive, and satisfy some of our concerns. But in the end, I don't think it hurts any time for Congress to have a hearing or to have a markup. I mean, members of Congress should have the right to offer bills, and Mr. Barton offered this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any other member who seeks recognition? If not, there being no further discussion, and the question is on the manager's amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. I now move that the committee forward H.R. 390 as amended to the full committee with the recommendation that the bill passes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. All right. Okay.
I think the ayes have it.
The ayes have it. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the H.R. 390 is favorably forwarded to the full committee as amended. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make technical and conforming corrections to the bill forwarded at today's markup. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman?
The chair, for what reason, for what purposes does the ranking member?
Well, first of all, Mr. Chairman, to thank you for holding this markup and supporting and moving the bill. Secondly, to request the customary 2 business days for additional views to be put into the record.
Without objection, so ordered. Without objection, the meeting of the subcommittee now stands adjourned.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
It's all right.
You have to like be right